Hello learners and welcome to your natural sciences lesson. So join me today as we're going to be introducing the concept of force. But before we get to introduction of the force, now let's see. Did you know that force makes things move or more accurately? So this force that you're talking about, it makes things move or it makes them move more accurately. And then it can also make the things to change their motion. So the force can make things move, or can make the things to move more accurately, can even also make the very same things to change their direction. Now, with that said, there are certain things that I want us to achieve by the end of the lesson. So by the end of the lesson, this is what I want you to have to know. Now, number one, I want you to know how to explain a force and as a push or pull or even a twist exerted on an object. Also, by the end of the lesson, you should be able to identify the newtons or the newton as the unit of measure for force. And then you also need to be able to explain that a force can change the shape, so shape, direction, and speed of an object. So this force can do all of these three things. And then I also want you to be able to explain that all forces acting on an object can be placed in two groups. So those two groups are the contact forces and the non-contact forces, which are sometimes referred to as the field forces. Then lastly, I want you to also be able to explain that forces act in pairs. So the forces that you're going to be talking about here, they are always acting in pairs. Now, before achieving these goals, we're going to take our main idea being the force as we are introducing the force. We're going to take that main idea and break it into two small concepts, whereby we're going to be starting by looking at what is this force that you're talking about, and also how do we measure this force, and then what are the effects of this force that you're talking about here. And then after that, we're going to be looking at forces, at how do they work in pairs, as we have said that the forces, they always work in pairs. And then we're going to be looking at the balanced and the unbalanced forces. So remember, the main idea is force, or the introduction to force, and then you're going to be looking at these small concepts so that we can look at the holistic picture of the force. Now, there are certain things that we know about a force. Now, those things are as follows. We know that by now we know that a bond is a force. So we know that a bond is a force that holds atoms together. So atoms are held together by a bond, and that bond is actually a force. We also know that particles in gases have weak forces between them. So the particles in gases, they have weak forces between them. And then lastly, we also know that gravitational force is the attractive force that is exerted by the Earth on all objects in the universe. So the gravitational force is the attractive force exerted by the Earth on all the objects in the universe. So with what we know, can we then be able to answer the following question? The question says, we need to arrange the following states of matter in terms of decreasing intermolecular forces. So the key word there is decreasing, and remember the forces. So we have gases, we have liquids, and we have solids. Now remember that the solid particles are held together by strong attractive forces, which is why they are rigid in shape. Now as you're moving from the solid going to the liquid and then to the gases, those intermolecular forces that are holding the particles together in a solid, they become weaker and weaker, hence the particles will start to move away from each other. So when you're moving now from a solid to a gas, that means the intermolecular forces between the liquid particles as compared to the solid particles are weaker. So these ones will have the strongest ones, these ones will be weaker than the solid, and then in gas particles, the attractive forces that are between the gas particles are much weaker as compared to those of liquids and solids. So that basically means that as you're moving from solid to gases, the attractive forces, they become weaker and weaker. So the question says, arrange the following states of matter in terms of decreasing intermolecular forces. So we know that moving from solid, liquid to gas, we are decreasing in terms of the intermolecular forces, but moving from gases, liquid to solid, the attractive forces, or rather the intermolecular forces, they are increasing in strength. So because we need to arrange them in terms of decreasing intermolecular forces, we're going to start by the first one will be a solid. followed by liquid, and then lastly, that would be the gas. So as you're moving from solid to gas, we are decreasing in terms of the intermolecular forces. So we are decreasing as we are going down. Right. Again, throughout this lesson, to better explain this concept of a force, we're going to be using certain words throughout this lesson. And those words are a force, and remember, force is a push or pull. We're also going to be using words such as equilibrium, whereby now that's a state in which opposing forces are balanced. And then the last word that we may be using will be the resultant. That's now the total amount of forces or force acting on an object or body along the direction of the body. So before we now start with our first concept, we're just going to quickly go for a short break, and I will see you just after this.